everybody, it's Natha Perkins from Electra Astrology. We are going to be looking at everybody's favorite episode, and that is the shadow episode, in this case, of the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is one of those signs that's kind of easy to hate on, and that's because our inner Capricorn, and we all have Capricorn in our charts. Sometimes it's louder in one chart than in another, but we're all dealing with that energy, and that is Saturn's energy. That is the energy of the judge, of the version of us that holds other people to really high standards, but really holds ourselves to really high standards. We get concerned with things like achievement and being on top, being the boss, and being in charge. If you're somebody that struggles with those things, then Capricorn and Saturn are always going to be difficult energies for you, because this is energy where you have to show up. You can't be lazy. You can't be self-serving. In many ways, you have to do what is in alignment with the higher good. We talk about Capricorn as being the master or being the CEO, and we cannot just take ourselves and our own success into account when we are the CEO. We have to make sure that everybody else is doing their job as well. And we have to take responsibility for when things go wrong. We can't blame it when our company, quote unquote, our company loses money. We can't blame it on the janitor. We have to look at ourselves. And so a lot of looking at the Capricorn shadow has to do with looking at ourselves, at our own shortcomings, at the places where we know that we were lazy, or we made a bad decision, or we weren't in integrity with something that we know we needed to do. A lot of working with our inner Capricorn is deciding what is in integrity for us. What are our own standards? What are our own values? And how do we betray those things when we are irresponsible, when we're breaking a law, or when we're blaming the failures on somebody else, or we don't learn the lessons that we need to learn after we've failed? And that's another reason why people don't like Saturn and Capricorn, because we have to fail. It's an inherent part of the archetype. Now, one of the things that you'll hear me talk about as I'm moving through Capricorn, and by the way, these are all episodes that I released last year in 2024 on my podcast, Star Narratives. I'm re-releasing them on YouTube because I want them to be a standalone body of work. So we are going through the sun signs in real time. I'm spending 4 or 5 weeks on each sun sign. We're going through all of the different facets, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, because my goal is to help you to understand yourself a little bit better, because it's through self-understanding that we come to see the changes that we really need on the planet. And Capricorn, speaking of changes, is where we look at the government, at the governing bodies. So if you missed last week's episode where I talked about the gifts of Capricorn, make sure to listen to that, because we're in a time, and I'm recording this in early 2025, we're in a time where we need to understand the nature of the government in order to move forward. Because when we outsource our power to an outside governing body, then we don't really have to take responsibility for what happens. So the goal, every time we talk about Capricorn, is to say, who's in charge here? Oh, it's me. Can I depend on myself to make good decisions? Can I depend on myself to go back and fix the mistakes and learn from them? Can I count on myself to act within integrity? And we all know that many times in our lives, we have not acted with integrity, and we have not made good decisions, and we could not depend on ourselves. And many times we've outsourced our power to some governing body, mom, dad, teachers, principals, the actual government, saying, you fix it. You make me feel safe. You make sure that everything is running smoothly. And that's fine. We need governing bodies. But then what happens when we start to see mistakes, and when the government is not running things the way that we know are in actual alignment for whatever our personal version of integrity is? That's when things start to go pear-shaped. And this is where we say, all right, I'll take charge. I will do my own thing so that I know that everything that I do is in my moral code. Everything is happening in a way that I either feel good about and I'm going to bring success to, or if there's a mistake or something goes wrong, I'm going to fix it. And that's what we're trying to do with Capricorn. Now, you'll hear me talk in these Capricorn classes about the inner critic. That's a really important thing that we need to pay attention to when we're looking at governing bodies, because we all have an inner critic. Some of us have a louder one, a meaner one than others, but we all have that internal voice that's judging us, that's telling us what to do and where to go and what we've done wrong. And we need to learn a lot as we explore the archetype of Capricorn. We need to learn a lot about the nature of our own inner critic, because that is our internal government. And many of us have an internal government that's really corrupt. It's the kind of government that's always punishing us, that's telling us that we can't ever do anything right, that's making more and more rules and regulations that we have a hard time living up to. Many of us also have an inner critic that is unfair and unjust or weak. So the more that we understand the nature of our inner critic, the nature of our internal government, the more that we get a sense of where I need to take over, right? If you have a government that's always beating you up, it's always condemning you, always making more and more rules that are hard to follow, is that the kind of government that you want? If you have a weak and fearful government, a lot of us have inner critics that are scared of everything. You better watch out. You're going to get in trouble. You can't do that. Is that the kind of government you want? So part of working with Capricorn is helping us to understand, as above, so below. We can't begin to change the external government. And we're in a time of such unrest when it comes to governments. Governments all around the world, as I create this, are falling. We in the United States have had a terrible time with our government over the last handful of years. All of us are looking around and saying it needs to be different. We don't trust the governing bodies to take care of us. We don't trust that they have our best interests at heart. And we want it to change. But the caveat is that it will not change by anything that we do other than doing our personal work. We have to look at our own government and how we relate to ourselves, how we try to govern other people. So if you are controlling or micromanaging or manipulating other people, you're probably doing that to yourself. And we are looking through the series of all of these talks. That's how I use astrology, is to teach you how to identify your own shortcomings, how to look at your own reactivity and your own shadow so that you can heal it, so that you no longer have to be under the thumb of a dictatorship in the form of your inner critic. And when you're no longer in a dictatorship, then you are no longer a match to any sort of dictatorship outside of us. And it's as simple as that, and it is as complicated as that. So if you like my style and you want to book a private reading with me, or you want to see my other offerings, apprenticeships, mentorships, I'm also doing quarterly free Zoom gatherings this year. You can check that out at electraastrology.com. And the first few of these episodes are podcast style. So after I disappear, you're going to go into listening mode. Eventually, I did start releasing them on video, so you'll get to see my face. But for now, you're listening to the Capricorn shadow, and I hope that it's helpful. I hope you learned something about yourself.
If you are a sun sign Capricorn, then you will know intimately how all this feels. But we all have Capricorn in our charts. And I always like talking about the shadow of Capricorn. It is such a difficult shadow, and we are all dealing with it all the time. As you remember, Saturn is the ruler of the sign of Capricorn. Now, Saturn is a real wet blanket. Saturn is the energy that says, in order to excel, in order to succeed, don't mess it up. Do not make mistakes and follow the rules. And some of us respond well to that, but most of us don't. Most of us don't like to be told what to do. And most of us want to be good at stuff immediately. And that's one of the difficult aspects of that Saturn Capricorn energy, is that, yes, it is a leadership sign. It is a sign of success and achievement. But in order to achieve, what has to happen? Like, we have to fail, right? We have to make mistakes, and we have to be young and new, and we have to start off as a novice. So that's difficult, especially in a society that praises success and that praises achievement. So then the question becomes, well, how do we get ourselves to be successful? How can we drive ourselves to show up, to learn what we need to do, to get the education, to get the experience? A lot of what is connected to Saturn, and I read this in my charts with clients, is the inner critic. You can tell a lot about what your inner critic talks about, the flavor, the punitive essence of your inner critic by the sign that your Saturn is in and the house. And so we have to have a talk about Capricorn shadow, starting with the inner critic. Okay. So here's something to think about. Is your inner critic more judgmental? Is it more critical? Is it more anxious? Like, what is the energy that your inner critic brings to the table? How does it control you? Now, a lot of times when I'm talking about inner critic with people, they aren't even that aware that there is this punitive, critical, judgmental voice that is always driving them. So, my challenge to you as you listen to this episode is to really give that some thought. What is my inner critic? What is it always harping on me about? What is the flavor of it? What kind of energy does it use to rule me? And most of us will have inner critic voices that sound a lot like our most critical parent. That's another thing that makes it really hard. We need our parents to guide us and tell us how to act and how to behave so that we don't run out in the street, so we don't take a knife and accidentally slice our finger. So we need our parent to say, do this and don't do that. However, we internalize that voice then and we take it with us. And because most parents, it's hard to be human. Most of us are very unconscious, especially when we're parenting, because we tend to be younger. We don't tend to be as self-aware. So some of us get more self-aware the older our kids get. But when our kids are little, we're kind of in that unconscious, just barely holding it together, trying to wing it state. And we will parent our children with tools that aren't very good. When we get emotionally dysregulated, we freak out on the kids. There's all of these really dysfunctional ways that even as we try our very best, even good enough parents can slip into. And so then we as children end up internalizing some of that dysfunction into our own psyche. And then it becomes this ruling force in our head. It becomes the government in our head that sticks with us for a long time. And you have no idea. Talking to clients, and I talk to so many people every year, those of us that struggle the hardest have the loudest inner critics. But most of us, until we really become aware of the pervasiveness of our inner critic, it's just kind of running us. It's always there. It makes us exhausted. It gives us headaches. It messes with our digestion. There's all of these ways that internal criticizing punitive voice is messing with our equilibrium. I want you to think about that. Like, what is the flavor of your inner critic? Who does it sound like? What is it on top of you about? And notice, and the thing with the inner critic is that we can't necessarily hate it and we can't necessarily make it go away. We have to understand that the inner critic is here trying to help. It's trying to keep us safe. Somebody the other day, and I can't remember who said this, said that the inner critic and the higher self are both trying to do the same thing for you. They just have different communication styles. And I think that's true. I think our higher self is more of our kind, holding, attuned, trying to keep you safe through reminding you to trust your gut, to listen to your intuition, to create space, to settle your nervous system. And the inner critic is trying to keep you safe by keeping you on high alert or keeping you hypervigilant about impending danger. Truly, the inner critic, it's not something that we want to be ruling our experience. So take a minute as you're sitting here and just take some deep breaths. You can close your eyes if you need to, but just get grounded and just come back to the here and the now. Put both of your feet on the floor if you can. Take some deep breaths into the center of your body and just get a sense of what your nervous system is experiencing right now. What is it like for you to give attention to this internal critical voice? What does it activate in your body? And you can go through your different chakras, or you can go into your different organs or the different places in your body and get a sense of, where do I feel tired? Where do I feel constricted? Where is there tension? And something to think about with this research on your inner critic is, how does the inner critic impact you in terms of physical illness or physical pain? So this week, as you're thinking about it, pay attention to the chronic physical pains that you may experience: tight neck, headaches, digestive issues, achy joints, what have you. See whether there's ever any correlation between a flare-up of those chronic aches and pains and inner critic, or superego is another word for it, a superego attack. So a lot of times we will be going through our day, just cruising along, and we will be under this constant attack from our inner critic, beating us up. You messed this up. You did this wrong. You should have paid attention. You should have blah, 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 whatever. And then you'll notice later on in the day or the next day that you have an attack, or you wake up with a headache, or you hurt your ankle. See whether you can make connections to that, because your body has a way of letting you know when to pay attention, when to wake up. Oh, wait, my critic is beating me up, and I would like to stop that. Because a lot of times with this Capricorn shadow and this inner critical voice, what it does is it generates our pessimism. It generates our fear. It generates the need to feel like miserly, like I've got to hold on to things, I've got to protect, I have to be on edge, I have to be on the watch. And we know that those things can serve us. A healthy amount of pessimism keeps us from making bad decisions. Fear can keep us paying attention to our surroundings so that we aren't taken advantage of. Being miserly can actually also look like saving money. So these things aren't bad. It's just that when they're fueled by this fear, this sense that everything's going to go wrong and that you're about to mess something up and you're going to get in trouble, that's when it's really hard on the nervous system. One of the things we want to remember with Capricorn is that it is about success, and that success comes many times at the cost of mistakes, of setbacks, of things taking longer than we expected them to, but success does come. We just don't necessarily need those mistakes and those setbacks to always come with this self-flagellation, this beating ourselves up until we're just this emotional pulp. And here's the kicker: this critical voice is some of your life's great work. We always say that with Saturn and with Capricorn. This is our body of work. This is what we spend a lifetime working on. It's not that you can go in and erase the inner critic. It's not that it's going to go away, or that you have some sort of duty to like never let it get to you. But with Saturn, with Capricorn, the slow and steady wins the race. It is the marathon of being able to know when your inner critic has entered the building. So you spend less time being beaten up by it and more time being able to step back into your power. Because when we are younger, we need somebody that says, do this and don't do that. As we get older, though, we begin to develop our own voice, and we begin to have our own experiences, and we become our own authority. It's what we do with Saturn and Capricorn. The more that you're aware of the quality, the way that your inner critic deals with you, the less time that you spend in that childlike state of like, I'm going to get in trouble. And the more that you're able to just step straight into like, wait, I'm an adult. I've done this before. I'm going to be okay. Here's how I solve the problem. Our life's work, getting a handle on this internal critical voice so that it doesn't have the power. It doesn't have the control. And you might want to name your inner critic. That's something that I did years ago, and it really helps because then I know, oh, Helen's here. Helen wants to tell me what to do, and Helen is actually stressing me out. And if you're listening to this and your name is Helen, no offense. But when Helen is here and she's stressing me out, I know that I can say, Helen, thank you. I got this covered. I hope this was helpful. Have a great week, and I will see you all soon.